fuzzy girl in my lap as I go live here. Hello. Google says hi. Hey everybody, welcome to Discussing Tabletop. I hope you're having a great week. It's the back end of mine at least. Guess could be the same said for you, Worm?
It's having a what week?
Back end of your week kind of thing, you know?
I mean, my week's been a thing, I would agree.
There you go.
My jaw hurts.
Yeah. You certainly have more physical issues. Catasome. But yes. It's Discussing Tabletop. We're going to talk about the tabletop news of the week and more discussion topics and such like that. I've thrown it off in the Twitch docket, Twitch chat, the docket, or if you're joining us, of course, later on YouTube, you can check out the docket down below with all the links and stuff. They'll pop up for you on Twitch as well.
I never turned my camera on. I said I'd turn my camera on, and you didn't tell me that I didn't yet.
I honestly thought about it when you were chatting about your tooth issues, and I forgot to say something about it then. It was like the discussion of your teeth and stuff, and I thought about it, and then it just left my brain, of course, during that time period, because that's how things work. It doesn't take a lot to just be like, out of sight, out of mind, I guess it is. In this case, it was literally out of sight, out of mind.
Yep. Until I opened up your stream, and I'm like, oh, wait.
Mm-hmm. So, seems like, it's been a very decent week for everybody. Well, I guess, I hope it's been a decent week beyond the, tooth issues.
Yeah. I mean, I used an excuse to take 2 days off work, so...
I mean, pain is always a good excuse for that kind of stuff, right? I would not argue it. Alright, now we dive into our topics, because you know what? That's a pretty good place to start. So, there is only a small update to begin with today, and that is on our discussion on Dicebreakers and the other group of online journalistic tabletop-related stuff being bought out by Gamer Network /IGN, and you can already see the fallout from it. You can check it out. It might have popped up on backwards. I don't know how much of the car noises are actually gotten rid of by my noise cancellation, because they're so random.
Yeah, generally not. Generally, loud, inconsistent noises are not turned out. The noise cancellation is to cancel out
and they love motorcycles or loud vehicles right on the back street behind me here, especially fast. When it's a 25 mile per hour zone.
Yeah, the place I'm looking to move to, because I'm looking to move out of my parents' house, it's a big complex, but part of the complex is right next to a freeway, so there's a chance I will be next to a freeway.
You'll get some freeway noise, definitely. Not consistently, but probably some big ones occasionally.
Yeah, like those annoying jerks who take off their mufflers.
So, we know from X.com, Twitter, what the hell are we going to call it? Matt Jarvis is losing their job from Dicebreakers. They announced it on that site, and I guess I can link this just for people to see. The follow-up to our discussion on this last week, where, honestly speaking, we could all predict that there was going to be redundancy in jobs. It's just the unfortunate thing that we're seeing it already, and it's one of those things is I am still not holding out high hopes for what this will mean for Dicebreakers and all that kind of stuff, and how it's going to change the landscape there. It wasn't the only place that I would go to for looking for interesting topics for us to dive into, but it was one of the ones that I was using, and it was one that I really did enjoy and thought our articles was good. So, unfortunate. But, we're going to continue to bait breath, but we can see the result of it already. So, update on that. We just talked about it. Check out last week's episode if you want to hear us talk about it more in that comment.
Mm-hmm.
Our first main topic that we have today, because we have a couple of them, is of course Free RPG Day is coming up, And just like it does every year, Paizo likes to throw out adventures for Free RPG Day. And they're giving us 2 interesting ones. Pathfinder and a Star, Pathfinder 1. Their Pathfinder 1 is the Great Toy Heist, where all the characters are playing as puppets, who are animated dolls that... Look, it's either like brought about by some miracle of magic, because technically a puppet is a construct, but occasionally they gain into sentience. So they gain sentience either through miracle magic or like stuff like love actually does it too. Canonically, love will bring intelligence to your animated construct toy if it's your best friend. If you have strong enough, it's a magic world. That's the Valerian. It's a world of magic, so stuff like that. Again, they're very rare. It's an interesting adventure because they are so rare, and it sounds like all 4 of them were made from the same creator, and that is like a miracle upon miracles, because normally these creatures never even see another of their own kind. Canonically. So, very interesting. So it's a free little adventure you can get on Free RPG Day, and the other one is a Starfinder adventure called Second Contact. That has a bunch of iconic creatures that you can face against. Some things like cybernetic zombies, some spells and other stuff that you can help out. And it is getting ready and prepping for the 2nd edition of Starfinder. So it's a little thing that's probably a little less involved adventure-wise. It's a lot more material and stuff. As more of a setup for, getting into 2nd edition. So that's coming out relatively soon, I think, within the next year. So
I'm excited for the Starfinder 2e.
Definitely, I want to see where they do, because it was very interesting to see that, Starfinder 1e was very much so like a step between Pathfinder 1e and Pathfinder 2e. So seeing where 2e takes us as an evolution of the entire system, I'm guessing it's probably going to be closer to like the refinements they found in core, combined with some of the ideas that they had for specifically Starfinder.
Probably also some of the stuff they added on and revised.
Well, that's what I meant. The core was revised. Revisions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, for Free RPG Day, you can check out the retailers near you with a link in this article. It's freerpgday.com. If you just want to go to the site directly. And it'll be next Saturday? Yeah, next Saturday, June 22nd. So, coming up. So if you want to stop in one of these stores and get one of these little free RPGs that you can play with your friends or yourself, you can do it. And usually the Paizo is pretty nice and a little afterwards. They do provide them, but you might have to wait before you get them. Kind of thing. It's like you get that privilege of having them ahead of everybody if you actually go to the store and get them.
Yeah.
You just want like a PDF copy of it, or I guess to purchase it later on, they do have that option. Or like reprint purchases kind of stuff. So, okay. I thought that's interesting. I always like their little adventures they do. They're always creative with it, and yeah. The other thing that we are getting is, because we are getting Player Core 2, the final book in the Remastered series, coming out relatively soon, we are getting some previews of it. It's going to have the rest of the kind of basic core classes and some of the core ancestries that they didn't have in 1 that we are missing, including things like the Champion, which is their reimagined version of a paladin that is not... Champion's really nice because it's not specifically set to one alignment. They're basically like, they don't want like, you can be like the paladin or the anti-paladin. It's just you're a champion that's like either, good or lawful evil or something, or lawful good or not something, that kind of thing. It's like, I don't think even they might even not say those names to it anymore. They're just like, you're just champion of this deity and stuff like that. So I always liked how they refined it in 2nd edition. It was a much better idea for that divine warrior. And they have kind of like...
especially because they have the whole edicts and thema thing, as opposed to like...
Yeah.
You must follow this, like, alignment, which in reality is actually quite subjective and up to the GMs to kind of bully their players with.
Yes. Yeah. They
The problem
basically...
with alignment is like GMs have an idea of their alignment, and they're like, well, you're out of your alignment, so you're gonna lose your powers unless you continue to behave. You know, it's like they
And I
kind of.
think...
I feel like that's
Yeah.
the only real way. Like that's the only way it ever comes up is if a GM like wants to punish a player.
And it's also an interesting thing because it is walking away from, like... You're still using things that could be defined more as good or evil for your character, but it is like more of a I'm following the code or ideals of my specific deity, and that's what matters. You know, in the grand scheme of things, probably people could say, so that's evil, that's good, but it also means that I feel like it is an important thing when we walk away from alignment that, you know, people are gray. You could be someone that's generally a good character or generally an evil character, but it doesn't mean you can't do the other kind of thing and not have to worry about it. It could just be part of your nature to be like, I'm a pretty terrible person. Do these sort of things, and I will always do what people consider the right thing, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, yeah, and I think the more important thing is generally that, you know, it's just like, because it's just like, what is lawful good? I feel like there's 2 brands of lawful good, and there's like, you know, 4 brands of chaotic neutral, and there's like, you know, 8 brands of chaotic good. You know, it's like, and certain people have certain ideas about what's what. Whereas just saying like, these are the things you should try to do, and these are things you should try to avoid, and basically being like, yeah. Oh, and there's a better balance of over should nots instead of must nots. I like that line.
Yeah, it should not instead of must nots. You know, I think it's the entire thing. If like, it's little transgressions don't mean a lot. Big transgressions or repeated transgressions is where you get against, like, you're going against your deity. And I think that's where it really should matter when it comes to role-playing. And it was that nuance of stuff that doesn't exist in a lot of older editions, which I feel like, you know, a character, generally speaking, when they follow a deity, does enough that they could, like, you know, do small mistakes or have small temptations and not lose their connection to it because to err is human, you know?
Mm-hmm. It also makes more fun for a character to have to be like, oh no, to respect the legitimate authority, I'm going to have to cheat. You know, it's like, that happens.
Yeah.
Like, I was told by this higher up to cheat, so to respect the authority or leadership, because that's the example they have is like the, you know, follow the law, respect legitimate authorities or leadership, and then like anthemas are take advantage of others, cheat. And I'm like, what if an authority figure tells you to cheat? You know? And so that can really lead to more fun character conflict if you think about it, and like internal conflict and what should he do, how should he go about it, etc.
And they also have like causes now too: justice, liberation, obedience, desecration, iniquity, redemption, grandeur, as like causes that you're for. That's an interesting kind of concept for them too. And they kind of like redefine some simplicity things in there. I think there's some concepts that they're walking away from in the remaster that I feel like are better to do, because again, like I think I've already talked about it. I'm not against removing alignment, but I kind of feel like you still want to define your character as kind of how they act a little bit along with it. It's a crutch.
Alignment is a tool that has become a crutch.
Yeah, that's I think the best way it is. It was a tool before, and it became a crutch, and that's where I'm kind of like, it's probably better to get rid of the tool because it went too far. You know, I like it as a basic
useful as a tool. I still like the fact that deities are set as alignments still and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're usually like holy or
fact,
unholy.
I'd say groups are where alignment best comes into play. This group is chaotic evil.
Yeah,
it's the average of their deeds tend to be a lot more chaotic and a lot more self-centered. Yeah, because generally I feel like the biggest, because that's the thing, and the real thing is, what do you define as good and evil? For RPGs, I generally define good as looking out for others, and evil as looking out for yourself. Personally, that's how I like to describe it.
Yeah. So, if you like one, like the article here does a very good job of showing off a bunch of stuff for it, and, you know, it makes me very excited to see how they've, you know, updated this here, too. This is one of those ones that certainly is giving probably much more of a facelift than some of the others because of that separation of alignment more than anything. But it's like, it's going to be the same, just shifted off in a different area. It's kind of what I feel like it is. It's sort of like, it's going to pretty much be the same as you had it before, just a little shift.
So my first experience with Pathfinder 2e is the new one. Did they actually have alignments in the first one, in the pre-4?
Yes.
Or in the pre-revised? Okay, so they said, like, druids are these alignments. Okay.
If I get out the character sheet, alignment should.
I noticed...
alignment was still here. I think it was a little open for like druids and stuff. If I get through this book here, druids.
Yeah, because the one that's in ideally both right next to druid, and druids they do the anthema thing.
They still do have anthema here.
Okay, they have
Falling axe and anathema to all druids, using metal armor or shield, displaying natural places, teaching druidic language to non-druids. That was it. And each order has their own axe that would be detailed in the order's entry. So the general ones are just like, don't teach anybody druidic, don't use metal armor, don't fuck with metal.
Mm-hmm.
Like Animal had committing wanton acts of cruelty or killing animals unnecessarily is anathema to their order, and that was it.
Yeah, okay, so that seems to stay the same.
Yeah, I mean, again, this was already a walk away from like a druid must be neutral.
Yeah, some version of neutral is what it used to be.
Yeah. I think
I'm
even
curious if they had they have edicts or just anthemas.
Like I'm looking at Champion bringing it out.
No,
they did have deity and cause.
They only have anthemas. Okay, yeah, so they only have anthemas for druids. No edicts.
Yeah.
So druids are only banned from doing certain things.
Yeah, and they're like they're kind of simple things, like like use non-metal items, don't teach druidic, don't mess up nature. I mean, it's sort of like well, that kind of makes sense,
Okay, and then
I mean, it's the thing that like I think Champion they had to define it more, because if I look at the original Champion, it was basically just like, hey, check your alignment. That has to match your that has to be like matching your deity. There you go, cool, that kind of thing. And so it allowed the alignment to be the crutch in that case, where in a lot of cases, as you said, it's what you would rely on, where they're redefining it as like, hey, there's a little bit more open there, you're following a specific deed, you have an idea of where you have to kind of go with it, but it adds a lot more to the role-playing of being a specific kind of, in quotations, alignment without being an alignment. And I think that's good. So...
I'm trying to see
because again, like,
if clerics have something with this.
The champions are definitely that the class that is like, for a long time, is like, I have to be this alignment, and so redefining it.
Yeah, are they basically paladins, the champions?
Paladin was one of the causes in /deities. So, Paladin, Redeemer, Liberator were the three main ones they had in the player's handbook, because those were the three good ones.
Yeah.
And yeah, they do mention in the article that unholy are options for unholy champions, but they are also uncommon. Which, again, that's an important thing that I think still remains. Is the uncommon, ask your GM, it's possible to play it, but it might not always work in every campaign, so make sure to talk to them about it. But it is something that most likely, depending on circumstances, your GM would allow. Or rare, which is, where are you in the world? Probably no.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. It doesn't say much beyond, like, you must follow a deity for clerics.
I think clerics were just so much simpler at it, because clerics also, in generally speaking, in comparison to a champion, cleric you only had to be like, even in normal Pathfinder, like first edition, you could be one alignment away from your deity and still be fine.
Okay.
Paladin, you had to be the exact same alignment. but they only had the paladin. So it was like, well, I think you had to be lawful good, but you had to be a deity that had lawful good in its one away, or, you know, was there. So you could be a paladin of, like, Abadar, the lawful deity, but you were, like, going to the good side of things, you know, I think. But...
Okay, yeah, because they don't really specify here anything like that.
I think they opened it up, too, yeah. Like, again, it's with going away from alignment, I think it's sort of like, it's the idea of, nowadays, since we don't discuss alignment, is you know your deity and you have a general idea how that deity works, then that would be how your tenets work and how your character should act along the lines of your deity, you know. This is what my deity does and believes in.
Yeah, they only have like 2, well, I'm just going to call them subclasses for Cleric in the new core, which is Cloistered and War Priest. Cloistered, Cleric, and War Priest.
I think a lot of their decisions comes on their deity because that affects like domain-based stuff.
Yeah, because that affects their spells and stuff, and some other things.
So,
Cleric,
it's the fact that, like, I do like it in a lot of ways in comparison to something like a 5th edition cleric. With 5th edition cleric, the domain you choose is really just a subclass, and it just, that one matches this deity. Kind of. Where this one is like, well, we have a whole bunch of these domains, and these deities have some options of domains, so you can be under a specific religious tenet and that. And that's just part of your character, along with being Cloister, War Priest, you know. It's layers.
Yeah. Yeah, so the only thing that really happens for clerics is if there's something is, they basically get healing or harming as their, like, divine font. And that just depends on their deity, so.
Yeah. In this case, for the champion, it's really the idea of your sanctification, whether you're connecting with more holy or unholy places, too.
Oh, okay, here we go. They have edicts and anthemas for the different gods.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so,
hey, your deity has rules that you can kind of go by. Wow, man, that's so, like, you know, it makes sense. But, so, yep, champion's a very good one to add in.
You, like, yeah, it doesn't say, okay, so if you do anthema, so even though they have edicts, they really only say you can lose your powers if you do the anthemas for clerics. So clerics don't care as much about doing the things they want as much as doing the things they don't want.
Well, the anthemas, I think the edict is like, this is your, like, idea of the kind of things you want to aspire to, and I think it's the same way too. It's like the anthema, it's not necessarily that like you're going to automatically lose things. It's that you have to kind of like have you've trouble. You're breaking rules.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I did have an interesting thing to talk about, and we haven't talked about in a while is Munchkin or Steve Jackson Games has a product I want to chat about for a little bit. Dun dun dun. It's a miracle of miracles. Munchkin the Floor is Larva. It's like one of their like small booster packs to the original Munchkin series, which is insanely sized already. It's bug based because you know the floor is Larva. And they do something interesting. They bring the bug race from Starfinder, which I honestly forgot was even in Starfinder, back into normal Munchkin. Yeah, no, that was the kind of thing I was like, I forgot about this. It's like, you guys remember Starfinder, Star Munchkin? They only really seem to ever do stuff for their like core set at this point in time, or add new ones. You know, we don't really see a lot of the other side ones, which I would kind of see. Still, nonetheless, Bug was very interesting. It was an interesting one to see, and you know, this seems fun.
The question is, which bug race?
Because
Starfinder has two.
Yeah,
Starfinder has two. They have the Hold on, let me look them up. In fact, I think they might have 3. Hold on. Starfinder race. Because they have...
Oh, Star Munchkin race. Star Munchkin race.
Oh, okay. Star
I would have
Munchkin. Although I
Star
thought
Munchkin.
Star Munchkin... Okay.
Star Munchkin was like their second themed Munchkin ever. That's how old it is.
Okay.
And they did like a couple of expansions for it, but we haven't really seen any since then.
Here's Star Munchkin.
The bug is it's got Scavenger. Whenever a race or class card is discarded, you may discard 2 cards and grab the discard.
Okay, so that's not... Okay, I thought it was based... I thought Star Munchkin had something to do with Starfinder, because you said Starfinder at one point.
That was just me saying stuff. Yes.
Yeah, I realize that now. Because I know they've done pairing things with Pathfinder before, so I'm like, oh, maybe they did.
I don't know if they did a Starfinder yet. I know they did the Pathfinder Munchkin, but who knows? Maybe they have, and I just missed it. God, there's so many. I mean, I like the bug species from Star Munchkin. It was a neat
Munchkin
one.
Shadowrun.
That one I think we talked about a little while ago that they announced that they're doing it.
Anyway, it just was recommended to me at the bottom.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times I just have to sigh at what they do, but at least this isn't like this is nice, but again, it's just, how big is the deck going to get? I'm just gonna say that, and we'll leave it at that, and, yep. How big is the deck going to get? So I think we talked a little about this before recently, the last couple of months. But now they are officially out, is that Chaosium is put out a new edition, I think it is, of the Pendragon core rules. Yeah. I think we were talking about how they were coming out.
I like Chaosium.
Yeah. And then they've got a campaign, The Grey Knight, also.
Does this use their D100 system or something else?
Oh, I don't know. It's, I think it's the Pendragon. It's a version of the Pendragon rules, so it might not be updated to their system.
Okay.
Or this could be their system, because I don't know how old... Let me see what Pendragon RPG is. Some information. Okay, so they did originally have Chaosium, then it went to Green Knight Publishing, and then White Wolf, then Nocturne Media, now back to them. So they had it from 85 to 97. And the 6th edition, the starter set came out in 2023, so I think this is the full publishing now. At this point in time, the full book of it. Because we had the starter set last year in June. So after a year, after they had the starter set, we got the full book of this, originally published in 85. You know? So,
yeah.
And it was them, so I don't know how much of what the system is in comparison to
it looks like it, because it has at least a similar... It has similar... Yeah, actually, no, I think it is. Because it's got... It's because I'm looking at the Pendragon character sheet.
Okay.
And it's got size, dex, strength, con, and appearance, which are very Chaosium things. And
yeah.
You've got skills, and the skills have little checkboxes next to them for basically when you use a skill, you can put a tick in it to level it up later. So it's very Chaosium, yeah. So
yeah, apparently it is based on their basic role playing system.
Yep.
That they have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I get god. Yeah, they're originally. I don't realize this until I check these things. The BRP dates back from 1980, so we've had versions of it from then. So of course it's pretty much probably on the updated version of the BRP to what's today.
Yeah. Which I own that.
So yeah. Again, you can get a PDF for $25 on the Dracovin RPG. There's a hardcover, a special leather version of it. So I mean, like, for one. I don't get that kind of stuff but I'm not against them having that kind of thing. If someone was to pimp out their book, and if you get the hardcover or the special level one, it does include PDF, which I also really like. I'm going to say, including the PDF. But it's got everything there. And then the Grey Knight, Challenge Death's Companion, is just an adventure they have for $30 hardcover, 15 PDF. So very small. But hey, they've got back their old system, and they finally are getting some like big publications for it for a classic. What's the word I want to call it? Cult classic RPG. There you go.
Yeah.
I was thinking cult classic.
Yeah. Honestly, like, I do have like an issue with the basic roleplay system because it is. I actually like Chaosium's system when it's tailored to a specific setting or game.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to do that with basic role-playing to an extent, like which skills do you include and which you don't. Like, there's some rules for that. But I also feel like they should have leaned into that a whole lot more. Because I feel like what makes the role-playing system interesting is how customized each one is. And, like, you can have these, like, percentages, but it's...
Interesting.
It's also just... Yeah.
Interesting for this system, it does use some stuff from basic of BRP, but it is a D20 system instead of a D100 system.
Interesting.
So its ability scores are based on BRP and a lot of some of the other bits of it. But there's also some things here like personality traits, passions that are a bit different. And, so it's like some of the stuff for character building is a little different. And they've got their own charts and stuff. So it's a D20 version that they created of the BRP rather than D100. So I would be interested in how they've tailored it too.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing I hate about D100 systems is they feel very unfair. And that's more of just a perception thing, and I actually know there's a lot of... There's a lot of psychology around that, which is why generally having smaller dice is better, because like when you have large dice, you get kind of this weird system where you don't like... where things just don't feel fair. It's weird. It's a whole thing about it. But in theory, mechanically and statistically, it's totally fine. Like, it works just fine.
I understand this, the psychology of it. It's a big number. There's so many more opportunities when the percentage chance is just the same as some other dice, too.
Yeah, like when you roll I rolled a 45, and then I rolled a 64, and I need to get, a 25. It's a 1 in 4, but I keep rolling these other numbers.
It's you have to think
75
about
other numbers, but it's a 1 in 4. It's like this weird brain tickling. But in reality, it is still a 1 in 4.
It's still a 1 in 4. It's just the same. It's just there's so many more numbers of it,
Yeah, that your brain kind of makes it that when you keep seeing all these different numbers, your brain goes, but yeah, this doesn't feel like it's coming up in the same way. It's like,
yep.
But it technically is as a D4, same as a D4.
And again, still the starter box is still out, so that might be a good way if you want to dive deeper into this to try it out if you're interested in it. A classic. This is the 6th edition that we had. We had a preview of it back in 2020, I think, when they originally got it back. Was that back in... They got it back in 2018, had a preview in 2020, had the starter set last year. So they've been working on it for a while. So, I mean, I probably took them a while to figure out everything from everybody else's editions to see what they wanted from their own stuff. Because they got to actually 4th edition, which apparently 2nd edition was never released. And then, people published stuff in between there with 5th edition and stuff. So it's like, what do we want from our old editions? What do we want from the new editions? What have we learned from our other games that we put out?
After we get done with this, remind me, I do want to make some corrections on stuff I talked about for Traveler last week.
Sure.
I just want to make some corrections about some stuff I said. Anyway.
We'll finish up a couple of topics here, and then we'll let you do Worm's corrections.
Yeah, because I actually went and I actually bought all the old books just to look at them because I was curious. after talking about it, and I realized I made some errors in what I said.
So, we've talked about it a few times, and it is published from Marvel, but up on Drive-Thru RPG, you can get actually they have a big adventure for their RPG, which is honestly, if they keep supporting it, I this might not be my superhero system, but I'm all for them continuing to support this. So they have an adventure, Revenge of the Super Skrull, for their Marvel role-playing game. So yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. Kind of feels like a very comic book storyline. They have the basic rules. They do mention they have the free basic rules on Roll20 to help you start out on their thing here. And, yeah. So.
Yep.
I don't know much else what to say about this kind of one. I thought it was an interesting one to mention because they are throwing out support about it. And it has been out for a little while, but I haven't heard about it. So I just saw someone was discussing it somewhere.
April.
Yeah. Marvel only does one thing. I'm not paying attention to them. They do a lot of other stuff. So they have one tabletop related thing,
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they when they originally released it, they didn't have a PDF of it. They just released a book, right?
Yeah. So it looks like there's got stuff up on Drive-Thru RPG, which I'm honestly fine with. It looks. Let me just check their Marvel section. Yeah, they got the core rulebook up for $30. That's the Roll20 VTP version of it. I don't know if it's the basic one or if it's all Roll20.
Multiverse.
It might all be Roll20 linked because they are all saying Roll20 on that thing here. So you might just be getting it for Drive-Thru RPG, and it's also good for
It says PDF. It says PDF plus Roll20.
Well, like the core rulebook I found on here for $30, it just said it was the Roll20 VTT Marvel Multiverse Global One. Click on this. This project does not include the PDF. It's the Roll20 version here, the core rulebook. That's just the Marvel. Huh. Is there another version of the core rulebook in here that I can find? Expansion Mega Bundle. No, I don't see it here in the Drive-Thru RPG, unless it's somewhere else for PDF. The only version I found here was the one that isn't a PDF and only works. Like this book here, The Revenge of the Super Skrulls, is a PDF and it specifically mentions it.
Yeah.
And they have a version of it for Roll20 also. For $5
I see what you're
more.
saying now, yeah, because when I looked at the bundle, it didn't include it either.
Enter Hydra has a PDF and Roll20, but it's also like free. And they have a bundle of The Revenge of the Super Skrull for both also.
Check out the basic rules in the Roll20 compendium.
Yeah, I think they're getting into PDFs now, it looks like, because this book here that came out pretty recently has PDFs. But this is coming out in April, so we might start seeing PDFs of this stuff coming up. But
April already passed.
But I mean, like, this came out in April, so we might see more PDFs in the future. But for now, this is like the first one that we're actually getting a PDF copy of it, other than just the stuff. It would be nice if they did that with the core book too, but you can get a copy of it on the Roll20 if you want digital of some copy.
Yeah.
And that's not bad. Companies have to learn. PDFs are what people like. Not all. I'm looking at you, Wizards. But
yeah. I mean, Wizards at least doesn't complain when people upload their stuff everywhere.
Sometimes they might, because honestly, what was it? There was one. Is it working? No. Okay, now it's working. Well, there was a site that was down for a while. It was one of those ones that had some information from 5e Online, and I was like,
I actually know what you're talking about. I actually tried, because that was during Joe's game, right?
Yes, I think it was the.
Because I tried looking stuff up during Joe's game, and there was a site that was down that I normally go to.
Yes. And I was like, huh. That's kind of weird. Got one final. Yeah, we got one main final topic, and that is, of course, Outgunned Adventure, your Pulp Fiction RPG that's up on BackerKit. Who had a 10,000 euro goal, and has certainly gotten there with 5 days left as of the time of this recording, streaming, podcasting. They do have a quick start guide for free. And the idea of this one is it's very Indiana Jones. They also want to do some things from like
they straight up stole that Indiana Jones font.
Yeah,
they want to do get in trouble for that.
They might not be able to. It's a font, so I think that's gonna work out.
You can copyright a font 100%. That's a thing.
That's true. So they might have talked to someone about it. You know, honestly.
I mean, yeah, like if they're using it, it might be like one of those weird ones that kind of got in limbo and is now free use for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I've seen this kind of font more often than other ones, so maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Also, like, though. Do your research before you use it.
Yes. Do that everywhere. You know, like it could be certain circumstances or things like that. Anyway, also like the Brendan Fraser Mummy from 1999. They're doing a little bit of that, which was very pulp too. Like I think that's like a more horror, like monster pulp, but pulp just doesn't have to be like your Indiana Jones adventure. There's a lot of different styles for that kind of action. Pulp's like kind of like actiony kind of things, heist kind of adventures too. They're kind of going into, you know.
Yeah. Pulp is basically. In fact, before I bite my own tongue, I'm gonna look this up.
They're going for cinematic action RPG basically, so it's supposed to be very cinematic. That you're like, you know, you're outgunned, outnumbered, and you can still save the day as the hero. Apparently, they have a cinematic game mechanic called.
Apparently, pulp gets its name from the type of printer it was originally printed on. Very low quality, pulpy paper.
Honestly, that makes sense.
It was kind of original pulp, like novels or papers or whatever. Anyway, but what defines it?
So it's apparently, they have a mechanic called Director's Cut, which rolls 6-sided dice to determine the outcome of tasks. It's not to roll the highest or lowest number possible, but combine as many equal symbols as you can in pairs or 3 of a kind, and so on. So that's an interesting kind of thing. You're trying to like match as many symbols as possible on your 6-sided die, rather than like the numbers themselves. So I'm like, you know, you basically want to Yahtzee the dice. That's a reference.
Yep.
And
I got a Yahtzee once playing Yahtzee.
I think I have too, but not in years. I haven't played Yahtzee for years.
I mean, I haven't played Yahtzee since like high school. It was actually something we often played with my family.
I did on some vacations. I think the last time was like
usually it was on vacations. Usually when we went to a cabin in Yosemite.
Where you're going to a place where it's like you don't have a lot of like anything. This is pre-phones, so you're like you don't have a phone, you don't have really electronics. So what do you have to do? Play some board games or go out and enjoy nature, or both. Play some board games and then enjoy nature. Anyway, they do have a free 70-page quick start guide. Check it out. Go with all the different things. Apparently a bunch of different roles. They're up to 10 now with all their stretch roles and stuff. And they have plans for, looks like, a bunch of different books along the same lines. So I guess Outgunned Adventure is their basic one. But Outgunned itself is their core book. So it's basically Outgunned is their core, Outgunned Adventure is their pulp version of it, and they got some other books in the same kind of scope. So checking all the different ones.
Yeah, so pulp is generally more kind of what it defines is mostly the era. So it's very much that like 1920s era, right? Or is it right?
1920s, 1930s, that kind of area. It's very
it generally encompasses that area and that era, and Also, generally is because basically it kind of is very low, very not a lot of extra thought put in things. So the plots are very simple, is the idea. That's what kind of makes something pulpy. Is like you know what you're going for. You're going to get the idol. I mean, it's kind of evolved from then, but there's kind of a style that's hard to say put to.
Yeah, it's
But yeah.
it's action. It's like simple stories with a lot of interesting action. Where like it's not like the overall plot that's really the big thing. It's like the little things in between, which are like the big moments, like the action set pieces. You know, very pulp-inspired video games are like, you know, your Tomb Raider games, your like Uncharted games, but those are very much like the actiony, like Indiana Jones style things. But
I guess
pulp
you
is
could
taking
say,
like that.
yeah, pulp is where the end goal is very simple, but it's what happens along the way that makes the story interesting.
And a lot of these kind of like ancient ruins type adventures are the very traditional ones, the adventure style of them. But like, yeah.
But then again, it has evolved into kind of also a style, which is hard to pin down. That also includes like actually well thought through things like mysteries and stuff. So
yeah,
it's like.
So I'm not sure if I talked about Outgunned when the original one came out at all, because this is like an update to it, definitely. But maybe I did back in the day. The original Outgunned came out. Outgunned RPG. How old are you?
Yeah. Well, while you're doing that, I'm like also just like, yeah, no, I do like pulp. Pulp is great. Pulp stuff. In fact, I think it's partially why I kind of like Cthulhu stuff, is because I do like that kind of pulp era.
Okay. Okay, that was last updated thing. Okay, I understand why this was last updated. You know, there, but originally like, like last updated recently. You know, that doesn't help me on learning. Like, okay. Okay, so I think it was last year that this was. I think we talked about this one, the original Outgunned cinematic action role-playing game, because its estimated delivery date was March this year. So even might have been earlier this year or late last year that we talked about the original one, and this is just a new. And they moved from Kickstarter.
I remember the title. Or I remember the cover. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting that they kind of. It's a different direction for their system, but it works very well with it, I think, because it was kind of like that was much more action movie, like probably 80s action movie style, maybe 80s 90s action movie. Yeah. This is definitely like it's action still, but a different direction for action, but it fits still very much so. So, you know, like as much as like Indiana Jones were like 80s action movies, they were trying to capture the feel of those pulp adventures from back in the day. So, you know, it mixes those styles, and it's the kind of, I guess that's a little bit of modernization of the pulp style that we understand it, is like the Indiana Jones, because it mixed 80s action with the original, and that's what they're doing here with the book. So.
I feel like the first one was very pulp, but then the other ones got very like pulp 80s mix, you know?
Yeah.
I
think that's true. The first one is a little bit more just pulp. They added a little bit of that 80s action. Alright, you have your update on Traveler. Time for the Worms update on Traveler. Activate,
I actually said based on assumptions about Traveler 5 that Traveler 4 was probably also very nitty-gritty. Really wasn't. I bought it and looked at it. And oh my gosh, like it was actually very much a constant progression. In fact, I'd probably say most of the stats and rolling were fairly consistent throughout all of the editions. What really changed most was equipment. Equipment and like starships and that kind of stuff. And then the story also evolved. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting to go back and actually look at those and see like, because oh gosh, so the original. The very first one I looked at, so like the original, so it's more commonly known as original Traveler, which is the first one. They had a lookup table that you had to do when you were doing a gun versus an armor. So like, it's like the types of armor you could wear. It's like this type of gun does this has to like hit this value against this armor to hit.
Oh boy.
Gotta love those. This is 1977, so very much.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
1977 is definitely
So
a time period.
Yep. So that's how equipment started, and then equipment has gotten better, and I'd say Mongoose does a good job. But then Traveler 5 just threw everything for a loop. I kind of assumed that Mark Miller having something to say in it, is probably went back to something, but no, apparently he just decided to flip everything on its head for T5, and I have no idea why. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, but man, it's everything has a stat from equipment has 10 different stats, and then you also have even the most basic equipment has at least 2 stats. It's crazy. Anyway, that was my one correction I wanted to make, because I made an assumption, and it wasn't actually true. Traveler actually progressed fairly consistently up to Mongoose.
So there's some interesting things that you're kind of chatting about there, about the directions it's taking, and the evolution of it. How it is a fact that someone that was involved with the original creation got hold of it again and kind of went in an entirely different kind of direction. Maybe it was bringing back some of your original concepts that you had there that you never implemented.
So basically, I don't know what the current situation is, but I know there's two people who publish it right now, and that's Far Future Enterprises and Mongoose. Far Future Enterprises actually bought the rights to all the old editions, so they actually sell the old editions now.
Okay.
Yeah, so Traveler 1 through 4 are all sold by Far Future Enterprises, all the ones that were Game Workshops and stuff. I know there's some other ones which I think still have some weird rights, because GURPS obviously had some Traveler stuff in it. And there was another one which I bought, which was a D20 version of Traveler, which was actually kind of neat. It was neat to see a D20 system for Traveler. It was very much classes. So your starting jobs were instead classes, and you had to pick feats and stuff. It's interesting. Yeah. Forget who did that one, but yeah, no, in that limbo period where it was bouncing around before Far Future bought everything back, there was some interesting in-betweens.
Sounds
where people kind of did their own thing with it before Mongoose then solidified everything, and then Far Future came in and made their own thing with it too. I don't know.
Well, I thought of something interesting, because when I was looking into it, originally, we had kind of covered a version of this topic that we're going to do for today, for our deeper discussion topic. We talked about ending a game that you're the person running the game. But I thought about it for a while, and I was looking at the topics that we've handled, and I was like, we haven't talked about this because it does come up not just at the end of the game, but as a player, sometimes you have to end a character. And I don't mean I kill off my own character. I mean retire a character, stop playing a character for various reasons, or there is that possibility of getting to the end of the game, and what is the end for my character? And
then there's also dissatisfaction with a character, which can also lead you to wanting to create a new one, meaning you have to retire your old one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons. You could have to stop playing the game, but you still want, an end for your character. That kind of thing. And certainly speaking, there are times that you don't have as much say in the ending as a player, but you really should have a degree of say. Your information... I'll just say this here. I kind of have an idea of what Ada wants to do, so I have an idea of a version of an ending that would be good for Ada. But that's because you, Worm, have done that and helped me know that about Ada.
Yep.
So you go ahead then with what you were going to say about.
Well, might as well continue with that thought, because I assume you're going to go off on... Mine was more how to, potentially as a GM, help facilitate that. But you go on with what you were going on about.
Yeah, it's the idea that wherever your character is going to end up and go to, you have to kind of display that. It's giving your Game Master goals. Those goals can, of course, change over the course of a longer adventure. They don't have to necessarily stay the same. But
I always ask players for aspirations. Always.
Yeah, and it could be that a character doesn't start with major goals. I'm going to tell you now, Bander didn't start with any goals. Bander's current goals is to get home. Yeah. Now, again, I think I try to display this, and we'll talk about it when we talk about games when we played on this last Sunday. I try to say, like, hey, look, you know, Bander's in a really bad place right now with how everything has gone to shit repeatedly. Bander hasn't quite gone over that deep end of, fuck it, but it's pretty close to this, you know, because I gotta be honest, it's just, Sigil is not really, you know, and this the thing is, I think I thought about it a lot more after that, and we can kind of talk about it. And this is just a little side tangent.
Part of it is Joe doesn't make very competent NPCs, but
that's one thing. The encounters haven't been run very well, and that's just Joe. And I do not bust Joe 100%. That's not having a lot of time. Joe has a full-time job, and then is busy on Saturdays, and so has to shove a lot of stuff on Sundays, and that does include prep work for a game. So over 2 weeks, you're like, oh, he's got 2 weeks. It's not necessarily a lot of time, you know? You have to spend on it. Because you got family stuff, busy Saturdays because he's looking after his father and catching up on everything to look after his much older father on Saturdays. And that's also a lot of travel. So it's, you know, then all that family stuff during the week, running a household, and then you've got maybe some time on Sunday which you can spend to prep for a game. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I did that.
Yeah. No, and I know. And honestly, looking at that fight, so the solo fight with the big guy was actually a harder fight than the two minions in terms of actual game
yes.
math.
Yep.
So,
but
we can talk about that when we get our game.
That is also that's something that I think we've talked about before. Is especially with 5e is the challenge of 5e doesn't mean a lot sometimes.
It really doesn't.
And it's sort of like, that on paper should have been a more difficult fight. And it was in a way. We used a lot of resources to beat it without taking a lot of damage. But we used a lot of resources. And then the things we faced, theoretically, just were putting on kind of
mean, literally, I think one of the most deadly things is the ability to cast a spell that takes up the entire combat area. If you have that, you are going. Anyway, we can talk about this more. I think when we hit the hit our week.
Yeah, but so
because you were talking about Ada goal versus the other characters.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing is let's we do kind of have to look at this all on a lot of different levels. You know, I think the basics are that when you have a character, you tend to have some goals. And you again, you don't have to come into that character with those goals in mind. Or those goals could be something very simple. Bander didn't have any goals to begin with, basically. And as the adventure began, the goal was to figure out what the problem was because I'm involved with it and I'm part of the city government. Okay. Other characters have been like, my character in Momo's game, which just ended. Their original goal was to go visit their old friend because they got a letter from them. That was just the goal. It was the start of the adventure, but it was their goal to begin with before the entire adventure occurred. Mm-hmm. Or it could be like Ada. Your original goal was rescue your brother.
Yep.
You know, and that still is the goal for Ada. So certainly, if I'm going to resolve Ada's storyline, I would want to have that be an important part of that storyline. And I have been making plans to add that in. I just haven't figured out exactly the right timing for adding that in. You know?
Yeah.
It's a kind of thing that is sort of like, it's a major motivation for Ada, but I don't know how it would affect Ada to motivate the end that.
I was thinking about that. I thought it would have been so interesting if you incorporated it into the Arcona household, like it was a servant of Arcona's or something.
I did consider that one there. And I have a similar idea, but I considered that there. And that could still be done, because there's still a thing that we could do with the Arconas. I don't know how much you guys want to be involved with that directly. It's sort of like, I haven't gotten a feeling how much you want to be involved with the Rebellion storyline, so that kind of comes down to if you want to, like, do some side stuff where you're doing, like, this is a major story point Rebellion, but, like, a lot of the other stuff is you just want to do that side thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to start thinking about ending characters. I mean, we're kind of at the end of book 4 right now.
Yep.
So we're gonna have to do book 5, which will be a big dungeon, which I like the idea of. Although I'm not sure how much everyone else does.
I think it's a mixed bag, and I think it's going to depend on how it's done. And I
I've
looked over
to
it
play a big dungeon.
I've looked over it a few times, but I haven't looked over the 100% of the details kind of things. I've looked over the basic ideas. I've kind of read through what you're supposed to do, but I haven't looked room to room how everything is detailed, because that kind of will name. But the way they also display it is there aren't a billion inhabited rooms. I think one of the Venture does propose the thing of hey, if you want to make this place feel a little bit more occupied, you can use some random encounters as you're wandering around the place. And I
think this would be a good. I think this would be a good system where if we try and rest inside, you throw a random encounter, a potential random encounter. You roll a dice to see if there's a random encounter. Because honestly, I think that's something that. I know you can just leave and rest outside if you need to, but that's extra time and stuff. So, my thought is to make some kind of consequence for one or the other, so that way when you actually go and do it, it's there's a reason you might want to. Yeah. Rest
also,
inside.
I feel maybe if you're in an area that's very quiet and you're exploring for a long period of time, something could come hunting for you or something like that. That kind of thing where
yeah,
because it is a place that there are specific locations you want to go. If you somehow manage to miss those locations for a long period of time, it could probably get very boring and quiet. That could kind of be a time. But anyway, getting back to kind of the entire thing is, each character I kind of have been trying to read where they want to go. And it's sort of I can give examples of me as the GM trying to read characters, because this is, again, something you want to try to display to your GM to a degree. Candace had the kind of role that...
I'm going to step in one real fast and say, honestly, and as a player, if you feel my GM doesn't know where I'm going, just tell them. Tell them where you want to go. It won't change the surprise. What they think you want and the way it plays out will be very different than what you think. Telling them will not hurt the situation.
Try to inform them stuff about your character. Try to give them information, or, acting in certain ways during adventure can help with that. That is a thing that does happen.
Yeah, I know there's a thing that some players, and I've played with people who are like this, who are oh, I don't want to tell the GM because he might use that for what I want, because he might use that against me. And some GMs do, but if you're playing with a good GM, and one that actually wants to make you have a fun time, they won't.
Yeah.
Most GMs are good GMs.
That kind of attitude is, if you are thinking that, then you have a bad GM. I'm sorry? That is bad
or
GM.
You've had bad GMs.
Yes, that's true. It could just be that you had bad GMs that would make you think that too. Unfortunately.
But it's also just a very common default mentality that some people have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I wanted to bring that up. It's just talk to your GM if you feel like you're not going in your character's not giving the screen time or the direction you want. Talk to him and see if you can incorporate some extra stuff. It's even a halfway decent GM. He'll probably figure out a way to do it.
Definitely. So,
reading players.
Reading players, because this is part of this entire thing, because you have to have, you as a GM have to, as you said, we talked about ending a game, you are part of this as ending a character, too. Whether it is any of those times. So, you, as a player, setting either early or during the game some kind of goals or aspirations for your character is important. As I said, doesn't have to be right at the beginning. You could start your character, have all this stuff about your character, and not really know where you want your character to go. Story can change that, Or it could be very simple goals that you start out with and they evolve. Great. Let me give my kind of version of what's going on in Crimson Queen, because that's the current game that I'm running, to kind of give us this. We talked about Ada.
Yep.
I would say Candace kind of has voiced a lot of Candace's goals. Finding their honor as a Shawanti, kind of especially the recent thing of kind of doing that, living up to their brother's legacy, that kind of thing. Which doesn't mean they've ended now, but it means that the major parts of their goal is, and so being the heroic Shawanti, but still having found that family in the city and living up to the maybe combining two families kind of at retrospect. Basically, I feel like Candace's character going into a position like Thousand Bones has been in is probably where they want to kind of go right now.
Yeah.
That's a feeling I get. Like, when the adventure's over and they retire, they want to be in that position of the between two worlds kind of character, between your two families.
Yeah, and at this point, where I feel like I'm going with Ada, there's probably very much going to be one of two routes. Either settle down with the Shanti and her brother, or follow in her parents' footsteps and go out adventuring.
Both are good options. I think I could give the suggestion to, like, have part of a storyline of maybe checking out where you came from, because you probably don't really remember a lot about that with your parents' adventures about.
Yeah, no, like my character was, I think my character was like 4 when they left.
Yeah.
So it's like very early childhood.
Yeah. Like, I had a basic idea of kind of how I actually have an idea on some of the characters a little harder. Ivona has kind of switched around a lot with kind of weapons.
Yes. I feel like I got a good read on Ivona. Tavel I have 0 read on, and Zardis I don't have a very good read on Zardis, but I don't know much about Zardis' background. Because I didn't even know she was in, like, angel. Well,
Asmar.
Okay, I did know.
I'm sorry, it's definitely since it's different now. It's I can remember the Asmar's name in the updated second edition.
Deva?
I have to look at it. No. Imperium. Imperium.
Yeah. Yeah, but because, like, in theory, like, I knew that she was an Azamar or whatever, but, like, my character didn't even find out till she sprouted wings, it's like, and she has not talked about anything about her backstory. I only knew her race from, as player knowledge.
She's the Imperium Planar Scion, which is one of the Nephilim Planar Scion types.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of that whole thing where I'm just all like, yeah, I don't even know. So it's like, I don't have a good read on her because Lightning has not given much information about character. I feel like
I've been able to pick up some things and start from where it was a lot, but it's Lightning's character has very simple goals, and I've kind of presented an option for higher goals in different directions in which Lightning has gone for. So Lightning's original character was pretty much there, and it was more like, the goals were to ensure the party kind of like does the right thing for this hero. So it was a very simple goal, kind of like, and that they were doing. Because their character is very much so like a fairly devout servant of Sarenrae. But I've given them kind of like a different goal of like, hey, you're related to a higher celestial, you could probably change yourself into a higher celestial if you want to, and they're like, yeah, sure, let's do that. So, It's basically, be a hero and take a place as a higher, evolve into a celestial servant of my deity, kind of thing, like that. That's the kind of, like, end goal of the adventure now, but I presented that as an option, which Lightning could take or not take during this last week, basically. And Lightning chose to take that path. And I thought it was an interesting one to give an option of. And basically, this was me reading Lightning and giving an option that felt like an interesting direction for it.
Yeah. Lightning, and that's kind of also you reading Lightning, who you've also played a lot more games with him, so you might know kind of more where he might want to go with that kind of stuff.
The thing is, Lightning can have characters that... I've been in plenty of games where Lightning has characters which are very quiet, but I've also had some ones where Lightning's characters are much more bolsterous, and you don't know which direction it's going to go with Lightning too. Like, in Momo's game, Lightning's character was very front and center, while Zardis is a very quiet, more behind-the-back character.
And
I think Linz is like that too. Linz, you don't know where the character is going to come from until as a player. Because
I just kind of assumed Linz was a very passive player.
Oh God, you weren't there for Children of Wrath. Children of Wrath was the opposite. It was very front and center character. Wintress was very up there character, and so you'd have Wintress doing a lot of stuff. So I think it's also that, like, Linz, unfortunately, especially because we're on the later side, tends to be very dead inside from work. So it becomes harder for them to be 100%. So that's why I think they're choosing a character that's very quiet, because then they don't have to be very active at that late. It's a combination of like life and stuff like that. But also, having played with Lynn's and other games that, like, you know, Momo and Lightning have run, I've gotten to feel that, like, it can go either way, too, for the characters anyway, even for earlier games.
Yeah.
But I also have an idea of where Tavel's going from the little bits of interactions from Tavel, and so I know, like, Tavel's original goal was going to be, like, to protect the city, become, like, you know, I might be dishonored, but I can go there. But Tavel, I feel like, might go for, like, the, you know, I've done this great thing, but I still want to see the big wide world now. So it feels like Tavel wants to become an adventurer now after this is all said and done.
Okay.
You know, and maybe, like, see more of the world after they've completed this. But I feel like that would be, like, an option of, like, maybe, you know, that, or I might present an option of, like, hey, you know, you've done this great thing. Would you want to also possibly lead one of these, like, groups that are protecting the city? I think presenting that option at the end of the game for Tavel would be an interesting one and a juxtaposition for their 2 points in time. And I could see the character going either way, but I think that might be something I might present at the end of the game before we get into the full, like, you know, what happens from Tavel at the end, you know. I could present that and have that choice. Do you want to, hey, you know, you could become the leader of the Sable Company, which was kind of your join with the Golden, or join them of the new, like, reborn Sable Company or something. Or, you know, maybe, like, someone from the Pathfinder Society would approach you and be like, hey, you've done this great thing, you know, we aren't really in the city here, but you seem like a person that would you want to join us. Which that person could approach all of you, you know, help us out. You know, you've dealt with some ancient ruins and stuff like that, and some old threats. Help us out. Go on adventures.
Yeah.
But Avona is a character that has changed a lot in their goals. So, like, right now, I'm not 100% sure where they want to end up, particularly, because there's options too.
Yeah, she's very... Ivona is very complex, in part because she was going one direction, but then a cleric joined the party. Like, she was actually going to start raising dead, she said, until the cleric joined the party.
I think that's the thing, too, is, I'm presenting all of you, interestingly enough, the only one that I hadn't quite 100% figured out what I was going to do, I had some ideas, but I was going to kind of play it by ear when we went into it, is present you with things that each of you has, like, unique, kind of interesting bloodline abilities. You're not, like, except for Tavel, who's the one that's really difficult to do something for. All of you have something that I can be like, hey, you want to have some more, like, planar abilities and dive deeper into your abilities that are naturally connected to your blood?
Tavel's a half-elf, right?
Yep. I could do less, like, actual bloodline stuff and more, like, directly, like, you're doing it, more actual character bloodline stuff, like, Tavel being a half-elf. I also wasn't sure if Tavel was born from half-elves or from I have to look that up. I was in their history, and I forgot to do that.
Yeah, because my thought could be, like, if she was born from human and elf, then in theory you could have, like, a sort of, like, oh, maybe there was some kind of royal bloodline or something. Or... important
person in, like, one of the elven countries or something like that, or communities. That could be an option. That was, I think, in my exploration direction. But because also we haven't had Lynn the last 2 weeks when we did that kind of deep dive, I didn't really set up much for Lynn. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. I didn't have to. Like, Joe can learn some more elemental powers and, like, and maybe, like, connect up with their genie heritage. You can connect up with, like, you know, like, ancient dragon ancestors and gain some dragon powers. Momo can unlock vampire powers, and, you know, Lightning can get angel powers. That kind of thing. Anyway, but back to the main topic then. So that's kind of like where GM comes on, kind of understands Reed's character. Then we get to those actual places where we get to these endings, and there can be, of course, first off, the sudden end I will talk about. That's hey, something's come up in my life, I gotta get out of here. Or something like that. That's the sudden end, you know.
That's also very important at that point to talk to your GM about if you're going to be back or not, and whether or not your characters should remain alive, because the easiest way to handle that is sometimes to kill them off.
personally, even if the character's never going to come back, I don't prefer the kill-off because there's always that, like, change of situation that could come back.
Oh, I agree. I usually try to avoid it too. I'm just saying, in theory, it's the easiest.
True. It is the easiest
because,
one.
You know, there was an explosion. They get sucked down to the vacuum of space. You know.
I mean,
uses power word kill to show show how powerful they are. You know.
I mean, usually when this happens, like, if this is going to happen, and a player's like, "Hey, I have to end my character." In this case, I ask them, "What kind of ending do you want for your character? Do you just want to go off? Do you want to die? You know, if die, you're not really coming back. There's no possibility of it. Do you want, like, some kind of, like, good ending? You just want to be very, open it." You know, I kind of ask those questions there, too, at that point in time, because then we can kind of build that ending at that point in time very easily into the story and just have it, like, you know, hey, the character dies, hey, you go off to do some other adventure, and, you know, or hey, you know, just something like that, you're doing something. Kind of like where we had, like, Cell's character go off and be doing something, you know, on their own adventure.
Yeah, and like let's say, for example, if Ada, if I were to have to step out and Ada were to have to end suddenly, I'd probably say a good one would be, you know, there's a very clear thing of her brother, so it's like, oh, she found out her brother was sold off to someone in Magnamar, or so.
Well, that's the thing I could easily do. Like, it's like you found out the paper trail of where your brother ended up. You want to go off and do that. It seems like a very dangerous situation that they're in, and you want to act on it as soon as possible. You know, that's very understandable. The characters be like, oh god, you know, because there is like a very family, you know, loved ones related thing to all your characters. So certainly, as soon as you say like, hey, you know, I want to go make sure they're safe now, the characters will understand. You know, come back if you can help us. Do what you can. We'll be here for you. We'll try to take care of the problem. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that this here is usually the easiest write-off. I gotta be honest, most of the time. It's the kind of like, the drastic, I have to leave the game, that's those easy write-offs, because, you know, you have to come to your GM with that right there.
because you don't have the emotional investment of trying to wrap things up nicely. It's like, okay, well, we'll put a pin in this, you know, we can you go off and do something related to you.
And if there is no emotional resolve to that character per se, it's fine, because that character has disappeared off into the sunset kind of thing to have their own adventures that have to be completed. Maybe you'll have an opportunity to, maybe you won't. That kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, and worst case, after you finish the game, if you finish the game, you can basically GM Fiat being like, and they found their brother, and they lived happily ever after, you know?
Yeah. You know, like, when I would then get to the end of the game, I could include that in. Yeah, I could include that, like, you know, they went on to all these adventures, this is what they did, this is where they end up, kind of thing, you know, for that character. It would be more NPC resolutions, which sometimes you want to do at the end of the game, but...
Yep. Yeah, I think end of the game resolutions are the hardest.
Then we have number 2, which is the one you mentioned, which is something happens and you have to switch characters. Now, that could be character death, that could be... like, the character just not... like, you're having problems with the character, either mechanic-wise or character-wise, too. Where you're like, man, something's not right, I'm not gelling with the team, I'm not having fun with the character, mechanics are terrible, oh, hey, my character died is one of these here, and then you have to switch characters.
Yeah, and something to facilitate that kind of better end for a character for death purposes. I've actually thought of something I'm planning on using in the future. I haven't done this yet. I haven't implemented it ever. I don't know how it will work. I think it'll work just fine. But basically, is to basically every player gets to wave a final destination card. Basically, they will not die in one situation, so they can die more appropriately later. And we can like discuss and narrate that. That will also give players a time to build a new character and potentially work in how we're going to incorporate them. You know, so it's not this sudden, they're dead. Okay, next game, oh, you find a wizard standing next to your party who's just willing to join you now, you know?
God.
So like that's something I've thought of, is to smooth over that sudden death a little better, where it's like it's a Final Destination card, so you start building your new character, they're gonna die, but it'll be a little bit more cinematically appropriate instead of at the kobold who got 2 crits in a row on you. You know.
I think that's the thing that is like it's one of those things that I am actually like glad we're at where we are in something like Pathfinder First Edition, because we've reached the point in time where, honestly speaking, Resurrection is a heavy option. It's not 100%, but you could use that if you wanted to. You know, that was something that in the early game you don't have, and it's a pretty cool recovery system.
It's also a lot harder to die because you have to reach like negative your con or negative your HP or something.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like 5e. It's incredibly hard to fight. It's not impossible, but it is incredibly hard to die in 5e.
I mean, yeah. Well, 5e, it's so that depends on so. If anything, Baldur's Gate and these video games have taught me, it's actually incredibly easy to die in 5e if your GM attacks down players.
I will sometimes do that if it is the situation, but I will usually wait and do it if it's a story-based. And then, when I will, like, hint that is a threat. No. I do not do that if I don't need to. Because
the thing for me is that I do know that if you're fighting against an intelligent enemy, and this is actually a real thing, by the way, in real combat, you don't
so you just voted there
back with swords and stuff. You would slice.
Something opened up. A video started playing in my background.
Weird.
That was weird. I had to go mute it.
So this is a real thing where people would, when you attack someone, they'd fall to the ground, and then you do a killing blow. This is a real thing in war, and it's actually kind of when I learned about this, I'm like, actually, that kind of works with 5e, because in reality, you want to make certain someone's dead. So once they're on the ground, you make sure you stab them again. It's a real concept, and in a world where you can magic someone back up to life, it makes a lot more sense to make sure you do that.
Again, though, I think it also depends on the circumstances. If it's very much so, like, one-on-one combat, you're moving on to the next person, definitely kind of want to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if I'm, like, fighting a group of people, I'm probably not going for the death moves, because I could be using that to take out someone else.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that in combat, in actual combat. You like, knock them down. You've got them down,
I might do that for a boss fight. Like an intelligent boss who's like, no, I'm not letting you get back up. I think there's reasons to do it. I think as a GM, you're kind of a dick if you do. Actually, no. Here's my thought though. And if the party member gets someone up, like let's say they cast a cure spell to get them back up on their feet, then the next time I might have them do that. Because it's like, oh no, you're not getting back up, That's the kind of thing I'd do.
There's definitely, like... Again, this is just an entire thing that we're getting into player death, and kind of as a side tangent, but it's...
Yeah, but it's... Anyway, but that was just because my thing was, like, to smooth that over, I would do a Final Destination thing. So it's like, yeah, it's how... But... Anyway, so player death can happen, but that's an option that I'm going to keep in my back pocket in the future, especially since I plan to do a lot of stuff on Twitch where, you want actually things to be a little bit smoother. You don't want as sudden jolts.
Yeah, I think it's that the entire thing is changing characters and stuff like that, where it's a sudden change in character that the player is still there, ends up just being, like, a lot of trouble, like, especially if you're doing it in, like, stream-based games. If you're doing it in real life, it's a little bit more easier, like, if you're just doing it offline, where it's just people, that kind of thing.
Your friend can go up and be like, okay, well, I'll go make a new character while you guys do this, I'll go, it's like, or even, like, they could go home early, it's not as big of a deal. Like, with a stream game, though, it can be, going home early, it sucks, but... Generally, you just have fun listening and stuff, but...
Yeah, generally just hang around and work on the character there. I mean, like, I've tried not to do... you can get frustrated sometimes too. And I can understand that sometimes.
I think. 100%. When your character dies, you generally want to cool off. It's in fact, I've heard that it's very common for you to be mad for like 2 hours and then you're finally good.
Again, because it also depends on the circumstance. If it's a big boss fight and you like lost to the boss and you died, that probably feels a lot better than like, hey, the random goblin just stabbed you and you died, and it's just like, well, that was just completely anticlimactic. And I think that's the other thing too, is it's the anticlimactic just straight off.
Yeah, that's why I definitely want to do the Final Destination card. But yeah, so ends for sudden deaths are hard because here's the thing, that's also not the end of the character. You have to deal with, do you get the body out? Are they buried? You know, like there's actually more you can do with that to give them a better end, which is not also always thought about. Yeah.
And there's other things like in a lot of more powerfully magical games, of course, resurrection does sometimes exist. You know, as I said, honestly speaking,
what do you do in the meantime?
Like, by the time your characters like reached like 7th or 8th level in Pathfinder, you had enough room to resurrect someone if you really wanted to. So that becomes an option then. Like now that you're like 12th level, you're definitely at the point in time where freaking Zardus could resurrect someone. Zardus could just be like, let me just memorize Raise Dead for the next day. Do we have some money that we can get together? Sure, we can buy the material components of it. In one of the many series, we can teleport to. You know?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, there's that kind of thing too. But there are other systems, like sci-fi systems and such, where there isn't that option, and in those, or even just modern systems, and in those... You have to figure that one out too.
You definitely do.
And then that's introducing a new character who also has to have their own goals. Oh gosh, that's always the worst, is when you have a character who you want to play, but then your party just decides that, oh, why should we trust this new person? It's like, come on, suspension of disbelief, guys.
Integrating a new character is just always difficult, no matter what. Yep. And that will come into when you feel the need to retire a character and switch them. Yeah, that one, you're actually planning it out. At least that's the point in time where, like, you've been fed up. You can actually get that feeling. You can start thinking about it. It's not so sudden. You can talk to your GM about it. And sometimes they can solve problems that help you, do that. Like, sometimes there could be switching around some stats on a character, changing around things. But it does get to a point in time sometimes that doesn't do everything. A great example would be, which Momo would talk about here, is in Buccaneers Shackled Sea. They were playing a character that had really interesting mechanics. It was not a bad character to play, but their mechanics really didn't work in the situation. They would hoped it would work more. But when we got into like all the boat-based adventures and combat, it proved to not work as like a stealth boat-based character. It was a shadow orc. And so it was sort of like, well, it doesn't really help. Now, the interesting thing was, for that character just stayed around and joined the crew. It just wasn't a player character anymore. That was it. That's what they did for the character. Which was interesting. Like, they could have just, it could have been more like with, Lightning had to leave the game. Lightning just retired their character to a city that was in the shackles. And the characters made a shop there. That was their kind of ending for that character, which talks about, like, the person having to leave the game. Similarly speaking, that character could have done this.
Come back? Didn't Lightning come back and make a new character because he didn't feel that the other character would...
No, Momo made another character. Lightning did revisit one time, but it wasn't as good because the character was already kind of, like, retired, so it didn't really work for showing up. It was sort of like... It was very hard to include the character. Did Lightning make a character eventually? I don't know.
I thought he did.
I think they did towards the end in the character.
Because I remember him saying he made another character because, like, and he might not have been a permanent member, but I feel like he made another one because he didn't feel like.
I think it was another character. It's hard to. I'm trying to remember the end of it. It's like I'm not remembering it right, but that's me being.
I remember him telling me about this, but that's also a whole other thing.
God, it was. It was just, there was a whole lot of stuff that happened in that game, but that's an entirely different story. But regardless, though, Momo retired a character, made another one. and they didn't really need a necessary, resolution for that character at the time, because the character was still part of the crew. But, if they wanted to, with them coming to me, they could have resolved their character leaving the crew, going off and doing their own thing, and it would have been a little bit like, when you have to leave the game, except it's the character leaving the game. And that's, I think, the thing is, in that circumstance, that character is basically the same as what we talked about before with the sudden one, except you are probably thinking more about you wanting to end that character and coming up with better resolution. The sudden one, you're probably going to come I have to leave the game, it's sudden, I'm coming up with the best idea I can under short notice. Me having, gone through a lot and, being, thinking about my character and finally deciding I need to change something, I need to get rid of this character, I've probably thought about a good way to get rid of the character. It's the same thing, just you have more time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good. So, we've kind of talked about that there. And I think then we can kind of talk about the final and last version of this as you as a player, and that's it's time for the game to end. And, yes.
And I think you as a player need to put a lot more thought into it and talk to your GM about this, because it's always... if your game actually reaches a conclusion, which most don't, it's always that thing where it's like, what do they do? It's like most players don't think that far ahead. They kind of think, oh, this player will always continue. Maybe that's an option. Maybe they go off and do their own thing, but,
Here's the thing is, I think you can certainly, we've talked about, understanding where your characters went, but at that final point in time, you have to kind of role-play out what's going to happen. Because then it'll give your characters those final choices for that, It's like what I was saying with giving the option of what Tavel wants to do at the end of the adventure. Will basically make sure, what it will be. But, it's because I don't, with Ada, I know what Ada definitely wants. That'll help resolve that story. But there probably can be options that will be given that, as you said, Worm, you don't know exactly where you want to go yet. If you want to go, retire with family or go on adventures, that can kind of be a thing of me presenting that option at the end and giving two good options for either of those will allow you to make that decision. And me understanding that's where you want to go.
Yeah. And there's also a big thing, too, where sometimes what you intend for your character can't happen based on what happened in the end. That's also hard. Because I've definitely been in those situations where it's all like, okay, what happens now? My character just had to kill their best friend to save the world. I don't think that I was planning for them to go and retire with their best friend on a cruise ship or something, Yeah. It's like, and I can't do that now. So that can happen too, which is hard.
You gotta, kind of reevaluate where you're going with it sometimes, too. Which just can be definitely hard.
Yeah. But outside of those cases, you definitely need to put some thought to it. And yeah, actually, I think that's a more point maybe I should say is also think of alternatives. Like, what if the worst case happens? Like, you don't know where the GM's going. Maybe you can think, okay, maybe my character's very scarred by something or loses an arm or...
It was interesting that, we got... Momo's game finished up this week, and it made me think we had some resolutions for our characters. And certainly speaking, we had... one character who we're in a world where planar travel is very difficult, and you can really only go to places like the ethereal plane or the shadow plane and stuff like that, and even then it's still pretty difficult, and you really can't and from them, if you wanted to travel the outer planes, you probably could, but it is definitely a challenge to do that kind of thing. And we had someone that was from the realm of shadows who was part of our team, and it was okay, I have to begin my, his entire thing was, I find a way to get back. And that's what I'm going to start to do. And I know I can eventually do it, but it's going to take a while. And that was their kind of, storyline at the end. And then we had some people that were oh, hey, why don't you come, and join, I'm going to settle down at my family's farm. And, the money I earned with this adventure, I'm going to invest in it and, make my family's farm better, and why don't you come and live with us? And then there was, the warrior person who's I'm going to go back and, back to my people with the tales of my great heroics. And there was, my character who was, I decided, late in my life, as a not quite immortal fae, but like, I'm a fae. I live a couple thousand years maybe or something like that. I'm a dryad. So I'm a fae that probably lives a couple thousand years because I'm a goddamn tree, So entirely, like, late in my life, I was like, oh, I found God and became a cleric, That was my storyline. And I'm like, well, I want to go back and learn more of that. I don't think I finished learning everything I could. So I'm going to go spend the next couple of decades doing that. If you guys are still around after that, I'll catch up with you. But that was my character. I was very long-lived. And I was there because, like, my god basically said, like, you probably should get involved in this. And I'm like, okay, cool. But my story just was very cyclical, but it was a very simple story. And yeah, it means that I don't really know where my character will go in the future, which actually I was fine with that resolution for the character. Because I would just go back and do what I was doing. It's what my character would do. And after that, yeah, where will that take me, with this service of a deity? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But we did get a hint that, like, one of my deity's main rivals, another kind of one of our evil deities, basically taunted us at the end of, like, you helped me out by doing this, because he showed up a few times and was like, you could definitely work for me. And also, I think a couple of our characters may try to take deals from him, and it's a terrible idea. But that's not on me. I warned them.
Yeah.
But it was a fine ending. That was a resolution to the character of, like, yeah, I don't get a full resolution to the character. There could be more stories in the future, or it just could be pretty simple.
Yeah,
it doesn't
and
have
that's the thing is, it's more just what you want is important. Although the worst, I just remember that there is something that happened where you and a player talk about an ending, and then when you go to get to the end, the player has decided on a different ending, and you're like, what? That's always horrible. Because it's like, oh, I thought we were going to go and do this. It's like, well, no, but my character decided to do this instead. It's like, well, what am I going to do now?
Well, yeah, and that's perfectly fine, too.
There's lots of wrenches, yeah.
Yeah, that something could have happened in those last couple of, sessions that changed where the character was going there. So certainly
honestly,
speaking
or
that,
even the player changed their mind about where their character would go, like
True.
that can happen too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's a lot of options. It's really just, though,
communication.
Yeah, communication is really the best way to get a good end for your characters. It's so hard to, like, but it's also hard to predict. Sometimes you won't get satisfying endings, because sometimes the cards just won't fall that way. It's like, what if, I feel like Ada will have a very different ending if, like, her brother dies in her attempt to save him, Like, I don't know where Ada would go with that.
I don't necessarily think I would do that kind of thing unless it got into a situation where
I'm more doing examples of, like,
but again, like, I can tell you, it wouldn't necessarily be out the side of the possibility of something like that happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely speaking, there is that, like, level of, well, where's this going now? I don't know.
Wrenches can always be thrown, but, the best thing is to talk to your DM, and if you're DM, talk to your players to figure out what they want, and that way, even if you do throw wrenches in their plans, you can maybe help guide them towards something that's close to what they want, because resolution is fun. It's nice to end things, and, but then again, there's also those players who are like, well, no, my character never ends, he goes on another adventure, and it's like, that's a fine ending, too.
Yeah. Like, that entire thing of, like, when you were saying, like, oh, my character will go off and become an adventurer. I mean, that's an ending. There is no real resolution, but it is an entire thing of, like, all right, well, you want to go off and you've done this great adventure and been heroic, but you're like, I've got the bug of, I want to see more, I want to explore more of the world. There's more, wrongs to right, or more, like, places to go explore, more ancient evils to fight, more treasures to discover. I want to go do it. I've learned from all this experience, and I can go kind of check it out and have a great time and discover more. And that is definitely an option that can kind of evolve from that.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that's pretty good talk about ending your character as a player.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it's hard to separate out player and GM, because, like, you can talk to a player about one thing. I mean, if we wanted to do that, we'd have to probably, like, write a script, because it's hard to talk to because there's a lot of intertwining things between players and GMs.
Yes. So you would always be ready for a lot of like things like curveballs to be thrown, definitely by the game itself. But just again, keep in mind what you kind of want for your player and play it as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So, shall we discuss our week in gaming? Because we did start with the two of us playing in Joe's game, which we talked a little about here. So
yeah.
It was relatively simple, but it was also a brutally annoying in a way, because it was kind of one of those things of like the minions were definitely more deadly, and I think it was again
than the boss. Yeah,
I think it was like a combination of Joe wasn't trying to murder us, but the situation basically was completely deadly, and I think it wasn't.
I mean.
So, again, we basically left off that we were encountering some tieflings from the last time we played. We made a deal with them. We talked with them for a while, and it ended up being fine. They were like, okay, we'll leave now.
I gave them some slugs, some very valuable soul larvae to leave us be.
Again, I think for me personally, it was just another one of those things. It's like characters like that, like which I'm like, I didn't want to bribe them. I didn't even care if they were there. It just ended up being kind of like, well, we're either gonna have to fight you or you're gonna have to bribe us, and it was like,
no, well, it was either leave, fight, or bribe. That was
basically. And I'm just like, and the thing is, I think the thing about it is, until the very end, I misunderstood what was going on.
Yeah, I did too at first, but then I realized later, I'm like, wait a second, maybe. But at that point, I was like, we'll probably be fine.
I thought we were here specifically because here was a great place to find the Modron, or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, that.
And it turns out, no, we just said to ourselves, hey, this looks like something that it might be attracted to, and I'm like, oh, that's completely different!
Yeah, there was that. I did forget about that. Yeah, where it's like, I kind of understood it wasn't definite, but it was also kind of vague.
I thought we were tracking it to here, and it had been here at one point in time.
Yeah.
Which it could have left, but I was like, we need to explore it. It could be here. That's what my character, like, that was me misunderstanding things, which was fine. That was like a misunderstanding between explaining stuff, and I think it was just, that was the week before, which we were at the end of it, and I was kind of like a little out of it at the end of that day. So I remember I was a little bit, but so.
And then there was the other miscommunication, which I thought was funny, because it was all like, they said, we were like, we're waiting for our boss, is what they said. And
that one there.
Yeah, and then we thought that meant they're like waiting for their boss to arrive, and then we're like, and then even later it's like, can we speak to them? And they're like, you don't want to speak to the boss. So like they never directly told us, but we thought that the boss might have been like, we're waiting for them to come, but then we just realized, oh no, they were waiting for him to finish up in the room over there.
Yeah.
And so we opened the door and there was an angry demon.
And again, that necessarily isn't an issue. I'm gonna say that part of the entire thing.
Funny.
That was unexpected. We had a tough fight with the guy there, It was definitely the kind of creature that would not have, I'm a diplomacy guy and I can't diplomacy anything, but it was fine. That was kind of the thing that, it was fine. It was a fight.
That is one thing I will say. Joe does not seem to like the idea of diplomacy as a way out of things.
Yeah, it's either fight or fight. A lot of times, it feels like a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's either fight or do it. Yeah.
He does do that a lot, I will admit. I'm so glad I didn't make a social character. I mean, he does have some room for it, like there has been some use for it, but honestly, we've rolled like social skills like a handful of times.
I try to roll social skills so much because it's my goddamn character. It's not like my character can't help out in a fight. And it's not like I won't fight, but I want to answer things with words first, fighting as a last resort. And I never get that as an option. It always seems to be the first resort to, like, violence or something, an issue. And, which, again, I think has been a little frustrating, definitely.
Yeah, I can see why you've been so frustrated, too, with that, just because, like, your character is a socialite. Like, you're literally you built a skill character, and you can't use the skill.
And again, like, I think it's just the display of, like, I think there's a thing that's really hard to display, too. The politics of Sigil. And, like, I feel like we aren't really getting into the politics of Sigil. It's like each group feels like very disjointed and on their own and very against each other and kind of stuff.
It's like we don't have to worry about... It's like, oh, well, you don't have to worry about... It's like, we're like, oh, how should we get past these guys? It's like, well, they're not the guys who are hunting you. I'm like, really? I feel like there'd be a warrant out or something. Like, they'd pay other people to bring them in. Like, I feel like that's a thing that would happen.
Oh, yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think that's, like...
I think Joe keeps them very separate.
Joe is trying to keep... Which is not necessarily a bad thing or incorrect thing for Sigil. But it is one of those things that is...
Yeah.
It to a degree feels... Go ahead.
I was about to say, yeah. My feeling of Sigil is that every group is against every other group, which I feel like wouldn't be accurate. I feel like it's much more interesting when you have these two are allied, but they're against this one, but this one's allied with this one, while this one that they're allied with is against this one. So it's like there's some interesting dynamics you can have there.
I'm gonna say here, and it's gonna be something that, I think is a very good way of describing it. It is very much so the Guilds of Ravnica for Magic the Gathering. For anybody that's familiar with those, the Guilds of Ravnica are like a big part of the entire storyline. And they do the exact same thing as Sigil. They take up various jobs in the city and control those jobs. But they're constantly scheming and competing with each other while having cooperation. And certain ones cooperate more than others because they have similar ideas. Like in Sigil, the red-white warriors, who are like the guards and security people, work really well together with the blue-white law people who do the bureaucracy and the, judgment and laws and stuff like that. They work together very well because they got some connections that are very similar like that. So it's the idea, hey, these when they have similar, color groups, they match together a little bit, in some of their ideas. And so I think it's like that. It's not the same necessarily here in Sigil, but there are groups that have similar ideas, I think, and really should get together more in the way they work. They could still be competing with each other necessarily, but I feel like we don't see that as much. And I understand maybe we're not in the storyline to see that. But again, we kind of hit up with some of it sometimes, and I would like for a little bit there.
Yeah, and I'm actually a little sad because I thought the game was going into a politics direction. That's how it was very set up at first. When you first got to Sigil.
It's a lot of weird that I honestly, sort of yes but no, feel like I know where things are going. The yes part of it is, of course, we're dealing with an assassination plot for the Lady of Pain. I guess is kind of what it is.
A plot to
overthrow, assassinate, something like that. But then the no part is
someone who could subdue her. Basically,
the no part is I don't understand anything of that, or how they're going about it, or how we can do anything about it other than we are involved with it. That's the only thing I've got about it too. Is what the fuck can we do? Yeah. That hasn't been displayed to me very well.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is Joe's railroading is super hard, which is fine. I don't mind a railroad game. I still think it's fun.
Oh no, I haven't had a bad time necessarily. I've been annoyed sometimes, but overall I think I've had a good time. Definitely. Yeah. But I do feel railroading isn't necessarily bad too. I just feel
it's not, although I do feel like he takes away our agency a lot.
He's too heavy-handed in the railroading, and he should be subtler with the railroad. Subtle railroading is better than heavy. He has heavy-handed us a lot.
Yeah. Where it's all we are not doing this. You must do this or else. And it's or else what? It's all or else. It's I mean, okay, it's okay, or else what? What are our options? your options are or else. It's like
it's like we either had to be like we were in a situation where we really couldn't, like, we had to go to jail the other week, and we kind of had to. We had no options. There was nothing there. There was no negotiation. There was no room for it. We couldn't find anything out. It was so heavy-handed. And then, like, okay, now, well, you're in really deep shit now because you've been sent here because you had to. You got to escape. It's like, oh, okay,
yeah, it's like,
well,
they're just gonna execute you. You won't get a fair trial. It's like, I mean, my character was even like, oh, I think I could argue for myself.
Yeah, so it was very heavy-handed of like, oh, you really shouldn't have gone here. And it's like, why'd you heavy-hand us here in the first place?
Yeah, it was very much just so like.
And then of course, then it's like, well, you have to deal with these guys here. You have to pass through their territory. You have to sit at their luncheon. And it was sort of like, well, now you're going to die. We're going to get bounded. And he backtrailed on that because it was a mistake. And I understand that. But it was like one of those things that was like, we didn't have to deal with this. This was unnecessary. The entire Gargoyle thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been I get it. He doesn't have a lot of time. But
that comes down to time.
Yeah. But I also know as someone who also sometimes doesn't have a lot of time, there's a lot you can do without a lot of time. Because you just need to prep the options and then wing the rest.
For me, I like keeping it simple when I don't have a lot of time, because then I can come up with like a basic idea and wing the rest. And I think that's the thing is I don't think Joe has as much skill in. He has good improvising skills. He doesn't have good DM improvising skills, which are different. They are. Yeah. And you have one does help the other, but you have to develop it.
Yeah, like I generally create a list of scenes that I would like to happen. And I create more than I feel like we'd get to, in part because I know players throw wrenches in and I have to throw out scenes a lot. But I generally create like scene ideas. So it's all like, okay, there will be an encounter with guards and there will be someone leading you to escape. In between that, there could also be, like, okay, maybe there's an encounter that happens if you guys escape where you are cornered, and I could try and capture you there. But if you get away, I'm fine with that. But then that will become the whole game, and I know, like, if players try and go that route, I know they'll end up being the whole game, and I can figure something else out later,
Yep.
Like, you create a few options. Yeah. You create a few options, and then you just try and pick and choose from there. Yeah, but anyway, going back to the last game itself, we then ran into, after fighting the big guy, we learned some stuff by searching a room. And then we got into a fight with two guys who, and this is where I'm like, I'm still not sure how we're going to get by this, because they can cast a spell that covers the whole combat area.
In darkness, and then once we're in the darkness, they can also put Cloud Kill in it. Which I'm gonna say, the reason why I'm kind of like hesitant on these guys as being the CR they are, is because Cloud Kill, which I looked up, is a 5th level spell. We have 3rd level spells.
Yeah, and the idea though is they can only do it like once, but you can dispel it, and it's.
Oh, no, they can each do it twice.
Yeah, so like we'd have to
twice.
Yeah,
it's really hard to take care of that.
It really is, and fighting in it, Cloud Kill is painful. I mean, I think I failed my save, and it took me down to like 5 health from max.
I think him throwing it down on us when we had done the thing where pulling one guy out so we could fight him was just like a kick in the balls.
I mean,
it was what they were supposed to do. I'm not gonna lie, it is what they're supposed to do. But I also know from experience, especially with running Pathfinder modules, it's not great to kick people in the balls like that. Because I've actually done stuff like that to players already, and I've regretted it in the long term then.
Honestly, I don't mind it at all. But I know and here's the thing. I don't think Joe will do this because I don't think he's he's good enough of a DM to do this. But I would realize, okay, so these guys can now take up the entire room with their darkness and damage. What I would do is have them follow us down and attack us in the morning when we're well rested, but out in the open where it's more easy, where you can actually just move out of the radius of these things. You know, that's what I would do.
I gotta be honest, right now, like, they're in a very good defensive spot, but also, like, you know, it's a hard thing to matter. Like, I feel like the best plan of action really is for us is just to bait them out using all their abilities. Like,
bait them out using all their abilities. I mean, honestly, no. I think they're resistant to fire damage because they're fiends. I was about to say I could just fire. Actually, no.
Like,
might be
the darkness only lasts for so long. They have a limited amount of them. We just bait those darknesses out. But if they use Cloud Kill on us, I could just basically, you know, bait them out. I'm resistant to the Cloud Kill. You know.
We've also talked about Yulin using Gust of Wind.
Yeah, which, I mean, they could then dispel that, because they also have Dispel Magics.
And then they could cast it again, but then we'd have to, and then we'd run out of that.
Again, it's baiting out, so they run out of their materials, is basically what we're going to have to do to get them out there. They're entrenched in an area, and we have to remove their ability to really fight us, and then we could be able to take them, I think.
Yeah, and that's the thing where it's like, this is it's honestly, like, I will say, like, if we were fighting them in a large enough room, this would not be a problematic encounter.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, is it's really just these guys being what they are, and yeah, you are right, like, well, and that's the thing, is like, yeah, these are meant to be minions at a higher level than they are meant to be solos at a lower level.
I think it's the thing
actually
is,
makes a difference.
I think the thing is, too, you've got two of them.
Yep.
That changes the dynamic. But also, this is one of those times when really, truly, having this, what the area is, makes a huge difference.
Yep.
You know, the area here makes a huge difference on their encounter, because they have area effects that they fill up the entire area, meaning we cannot avoid them. And that makes a difference, too.
Yeah. There is a thing where also, and I was looking at Xanathar's guide actually, and I realized there's a thing that says like how many types of magic items players should have at certain levels, and I realized we are actually under-equipped. We should actually probably each have like a +1 item by now.
Probably. I would say yes. Like, and that's the thing is, like, the thing is, I also understand, we are in a very hard story to do that, honestly speaking, the way things are set up now. Which isn't really a fault of Joe's, I think. It's just the way that the event, not a direct fault, just the way that the story has been presented and what kind of things we've encountered and gone through. We are not in a place where we feel like we get equipment very easily. He's given us magic items, but he's given us shit magic items that are kind of silly.
Yeah,
he gave us mean magic items, which aren't necessarily bad. Like the web of some the wand of some webs. It's technically useful.
Yeah,
technically.
So here's the thing: the haste thing, or not the haste, the magic weapon wand that he gave me is actually very useless because, it's like I can only cast it to give a +1, and that's fine, but it's like, doesn't someone already have a +1 something? I think.
It doesn't work on anything that's like actually magical, and like Yulin can already cast Shillelagh. Yeah, like the way the rules are written, it doesn't help with any of the people that actually could use it. Because like, at most, I think you could like, I think you could give it to me, but I avoid melee like the plague because I have no strength or dexterity. That's why I focus on, you know, doing things like what is it? Insulting people.
Yeah, Visitor's Mockery. No, not Visitor's. Yes, Visitor's Mockery. Yeah, and then we have a monk, and then we have like Shillelagh is the closest thing I can do to doing that. And what's the other? Oh, and then we have the Pact of the Blade, which is also a magical thing.
Oh, okay. I gotta be honest. I felt bad for Momo for coming in during that session because it was a tough session to come back in.
Yeah, actually, and I will say, which is why I want to talk to Joe about, one, it should be able to apply to magic weapons, and two, if we get a +1, it should be able to add a +1 on top of it. I'm playing in, because here's the thing, it's concentration anyway. All I have to do is hit me and the plus goes away, which is why Baldur's Gate 3 does this, where it just lets you do the +2 on top of it, because it knows you're probably gonna get hit and lose the concentration at some point.
Yeah.
This is something I've started to like realize with a lot of spells that are like, they're highly restrictive, and then they add another restriction. It's like, these are holdovers from 3.5, where they had to be super restrictive with things to prevent stacking. But in 5e, I've started to find that stacking is actually not as big of a problem, because most things just break. Like you can break things without stacking, and the things that stack generally don't break.
It's also, I feel like, it's something that I've kind of felt like that I dislike on buff characters in 5e, now that I've played them a little bit. You really can only get one major concentration thing, one major buff. And the thing is, those buffs aren't usually that great. It's so hard to find a buff that's like really, really good that really makes a difference. And it's sort of like...
hey, you can haste one person, and then you get hit and you lose that, and now they're not hasted, they're slowed. Okay, well, let me try a different one. It's like, well, might as well just haste again?
But the thing is also, it's like, well, I hasted that one person, I guess they've got some bonuses. Can I give anything to anybody else? No. Well... It's sort of like that, the idea of a character, like, a support character doesn't exist the same way, because so many spells are concentration. And I actually kind of really become just like that. Like, I'm going to tell you, which we'll get to in a second here, my character that ended in, we were doing a high-level campaign, I was a high-level cleric. I had to, like, choose carefully which buff spell, and, like, a lot of times it was sort of like, well, this buff spell sort of gives a bonus, and this one sort of gives a bonus. I guess I'll take this one. And then it sort of helps, but it doesn't, because then I can't, like, throw a bunch of different things out there, because, like, there's, like, the lower level, because, again, it's, like, higher level spells that are sort of better intrinsically, but they kind of help, instead of, like, oh, I guess I can just use less, which is okay.
Yeah, so, I'm playing Solasta, and I've kind of realized how to, because it's funny, because I haven't done as many buff characters in Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know why, I just haven't. But there are enough, and so, like, but I'm doing one in Solasta, and I realized, okay, so my tactic is to get one buff spell of each spell level, because in the end, it's like, okay, I can still buff if I run out of that level spell slot, but there's very much this thing where I'm really only using one buff at a time. But so basically it's all like, I'm getting other things, because buffs are kind of worthless. Outside of, but yeah, no, something I would do if I were homebrewing, this is something I've thought of, probably you can maintain a number of concentration spells equal to maybe your int modifier or whiz modifier to make, I'd probably do int to make int a more useful skill.
And you could still lose them by making, like, a check or something that, you know, if you hit.
Oh, but... and I'd and the number you're concentrating on would probably, like, increase the check. So it's like, if you're concentrating on 2, you add, like, 5, you add, like, 1 to the check, you know?
Because, I mean, like, I'm sorry, I have not encountered, like, a necessary, like, huge build for any character. And maybe there are some classes which that would not be as good on. But, like, I'm sorry for, like, Cleric and Druid, when I've looked over their spell, this is especially getting towards that, like, that 10th level and higher spell. No, it really hasn't felt like it. Like, I had, like, one really mean, super powerful sort of buff spell that I could cast 1 per day. I was thinking we were, like, 12th level at the end, and I had one 6th level slot for a concentration spell, which would have made me a better melee character, but that was about it.
Yeah, so here's the thing. You're much better, in 5e, you're much better putting your points into concentration attack spells. Because at that point, you are doing damage every turn or something, rather than giving a potential bonus which can easily be lost. It's like haste is good, but honestly, I mean, in Solasta, I literally ran into this twice now, where I was fighting a enemy, and they just cast a spell on me and broke my concentration because they did 1 billion damage.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is it's based off how much damage you take.
Yep.
It's either 10 or your damage, or the damage, or half the damage taken.
Like, I took a
Whichever is
critical hit
higher.
during the finale of Momo's game, and I lost a concentration spell, because, yeah, it was a critical hit. It did, like, a shit ton of damage. We were fighting a giant monster.
Yeah, and like in Celeste, I was fighting a mage, and they just did, like, honestly, I think they did Cone of Cold, and it's just, like, on my whole party.
I should talk a little bit more about other things that happened, because we've gone into busting on 5e a little bit more here.
Yeah. We should.
I had a game on Monday, that was River's game, which, we basically were going to rescue someone. An elf friend of one of the characters was kidnapped by a man. We found out that, the entire storyline is the evil king, who we've been dealing with, which, Lynn's character's been dealing with because they're from their kingdom. We're basically at a magic school that's in, like, not really in any kingdoms, but they deal with all the different kingdoms, basically, in the continent. Okay. The evil king, who's also maybe immortal, and possibly a vampire, so I might want to kill him, because I'm anathema to eat undead. But, side point. Basically convinced this one guy to change his jobs repeatedly in the magical school into different types of magic casters he was really mad at. Who just made, and by convincing him, just said, you know what, we have enough of that type of class. You be this instead. Basically did that to the guy twice. And so he broke and was going to do something horrible, and we managed to convince him not, and basically convince him, and hopefully Lynn's character, that her king is really awful and you should probably get rid of him. Because he's really bad for your country. Because he keeps doing this shit. And also he's very evil because he basically tried to cheat in this chess tournament, which we're not even done yet, with Lynn. Really hard cheat, you know. Anyway, that was an entire story. And then, we had Momo's Games finale on Tuesday, where we fought a living incarnation of the demi-plane we were in. And we beat it and, you know, banished back the horrible evil that was trying to influence our world, etc., etc. Got back home, got some reward, learned that another evil deity is going to take advantage of that situation. Oh no, you know, and then we went our separate ways. So it was pretty simple. You know, we won the day. And then we had Wednesday, where, you know, you had your emotional thing with someone that died.
Yep.
And got to learn some, got to, like, you know, feel like you could get back with some of your old pep in your step, and then Lightning had a meeting with someone that was an angelic person from their deity, and got some options for some stuff, and then you broke into a secret, like, underground area that's next to a prison that basically some red mantises have moved into, and you were fighting them. And there were some really great moments, like the goblin bartender who teleported away.
Yep.
Who's just like, you like fought this monster that was guarding a door, got into the door, and inside the door was like, "Welcome to my bar!"
And we're like, we don't trust this for a second.
No, you shouldn't! I'm sorry, even if he's got a lot of bluff, it's sort of like one of those things where I'm like, this is the most untrustworthy thing I could find, is going into a, like, secret passage and finding a guy with a tiny bar in a room. It was like a 10 by 10 room a guy set up a bar into. Yep. And he fought some undead, and Tavel sniped a red mantis with, like, an ultimate strike. It was very awesome. And that's where we ended. It was fun.
Yep. No, it was fun. I really am starting to just love tactical combat in some of these games. I'm starting to just like it more and more. In fact, I've been really liking, like, 5e tactical combat. I really want to get more into, like, that's why I think partly why I love maps.
I think it's one of the reasons that I like going back to something like Pathfinder First Edition, because it is much more tactical, and it's something I do miss from 5e. Yeah, 5e brings a lot of good things in, but I think 5e just doesn't do tactical combat very well. It's that problem with higher level combat there is just basically wail on something till it's dead kind of mentality. There really isn't a lot of, like, nuance to the combat a lot of times that you can add in. You can get there. It's just a lot harder to get there, I think, is what it is, than like some of the older systems where it's a lot more built into it. Cough 40, cough 40. But anyway, you've been playing basically something based on the Solosis, right? Or Solosis, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Solasta.
Solasta, thank you. How has that gone?
I've been enjoying it a lot. I first time through picked above average difficulty, and this is where they stab you a lot when you're down. That's generally how you make the game more difficult, I've realized. Also, like, the enemies are like, wait, like, I mean, I'm fighting like a CR. See, it was because like you can see the CR on certain creatures. It was a CR 7 and like 2 CR like 4s, and the CR 7 had legendary actions. And my party is level 5.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a lot. Thankfully, I figured out the trick. It was to stand underneath the windows because the thing doesn't regenerate in light. Okay. And yes, the thing regenerated. It gave 10 health every turn when it wasn't in light.
Pleasant.
Yeah, and then I fought and then immediately, like, shortly after that fight, I had to fight, like, a CR8 creature and, like, a dozen other creatures. Because he was a necromancer. And he went first, and because it was after a cutscene, all my party started standing next to each other. He went first and did Cone of Cold on my entire party, and somehow I came back. I did that today. It was just like, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, he literally took down 2 of my party members to slivers of health. And then, like, another one to half health. And then the last one, I actually think I only did it on 3 of the 4. They're at least standing in a line and not in a box. But yeah, I failed my persuasion check to be like, hey, we can do this peacefully. And he's like, no, you're here to murder me.
You will murder me. I must destroy you.
Yeah, it was, although I'm enjoying it. I think that's the thing where I'm like, I'm really starting to get into, like, tactical combat in 5e, because I'm also playing, like, a hard mode of Baldur's Gate in my own time. So it's just like, I'm, like, really thinking through things, and that's, yeah, I agree with you on the concentration stuff, where it's all like, there's not much of a point in getting... I've also found Healing Word is way better than Cure Wounds, because it's just really to get people up. It's the only thing I use it for.
It's an emergency heal in case you need it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Especially when they attack especially when both Baldur's Gate 3 and this game, they attack your down party members on the higher difficulties. You need to get them up, or else you lose them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like wasting a turn to have them stand is better than them dying, because honestly, a lot of the times when they stand, they can then take a shot or do something before going back down again, and then you can revive them. And generally, the heavier hitters, because this thing is like, I also know how to build where it's like, I have one character who I made a ranger with Hunter's Mark, and Solasta, and she has a +9 to attack at level 5 and 2 attacks.
Yeah.
Also, the feats in Solasta are different, and one of the feats, though, I picked is basically you never have disadvantage on bow shots. And so literally this character is stand in the back, Hunter's Mark people, and shoot the hell out of them.
Alright then.
Yep. I love it.
But I guess that's all the tabletop stuff we did this week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't do anything else. I don't think so.
I didn't either, besides maybe looking over those books of Traveler because I was curious.
Hey, you know, it's good to check sometimes the older stuff for inspiration. I guess we should probably leave it there, though. Actually, we're getting on time. We've kind of sidetracked a few times. It's
sidetracked pretty hard on. Yeah, we did sidetrack pretty hard, complaining about 5e there at the end.
I both love and hate 5e. It's that kind of thing of a love-hate. That there's so much great about it, but then they're like I think it's the bad things are very bad, the good things are very good. So that's why it's a very hard system that way. Like, you know, it's so great for just to pick up and play. When you get into those like deep components and stuff like that, it's just like, this is just really bad. But then also comes the question, is like, oh, you've done that sometimes. I don't know. Anyway, why don't you give your shout out? I'll give a shout out and we'll end it.
Yeah, I'm DiamondWyrm.
I'm
you
getting
can
hungry.
find me on twitch.tv/DiamondWyrm or at DiamondWyrm on Twitter. My next stream will be tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. PDT.
Cool.
See you there.
Myself, Dracovin. You can find me of course, on both YouTube and Twitch, depending on where you're finding me. Check the other one out. I do a lot of tabletop-related streams, some gaming streams, and some things like the Crimson Queen on Wednesdays at 9, where we play the live play of Pathfinder 1st Edition, and this show every Saturday at 6. All of the tabletop stuff goes up on the YouTube channel. That's where you're going to find it, basically archived and put up. I do social media linked below. My current schedule is I was taking a workcation off because just making basically cut off from most of the main streams, so I'm using that to work on stuff in the back end, catch up with some work. Still planning on Crimson Queen and discussing tabletop next week. So the next stream is typically Wednesday, but we're missing at least one player this week, maybe missing possibly some more. So we're playing this Wednesday by ear at least for Crimson Queen. I still have some uploads to put up, so expect all the stuff up on YouTube if you're watching this on, I'm planning on uploading this on Monday next week, so expect more uploads still if you're watching this on YouTube. But otherwise, if you're joining me on Twitch, hey, see you guys Wednesday at this point in time. I'll still be on Discord and Twitter at least, so I'm basically, just spending some time. One of these days I'll have an actual vacation week, but I got back-end stuff to work on and catch up on. I'll try to relax a little bit, but definitely got some back-end stuff to work on, so I'll be doing that. All right, everybody, have a great rest of the day. Until the next time, bye.